Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's Nick again. And in this video, we're going to talk about unusual or specialty certifications. So, one of the things that you guys are going to see generally when you look at um, you know, advice given by people who've been in the industry for a while to folks who are new are going to be a lot of the same kind of certifications. So, it's going to be looking at, you want to get a Network Plus, you want to go get an entry level Linux certification or Windows certification, and you kind of progress through a number of standard certifications. And what I wanted to talk about is specializing in things. So it's a little bit counterintuitive, but if you try to be good at everything, um, generally means that you're oftentimes going to be less qualified for specific jobs. Now, anytime that you specialize, you are going to um, basically um, be in an area where there's going to be uh, less supply, right? So it's by specializing in something, you're picking a niche area, which means that there's going to be less people who know how to do it. And that's one of the things that initially, I don't think I necessarily consciously thought of it, but that's one of the things that I really benefited from in the beginning of my career by being somebody who, worked on Solaris systems and HPUX and AIX and things like that. I was a Unix admin. And at that time, Linux was very much in its infancy, and there were not a lot of people who knew how to do this stuff. Being able to compile software from source and track down dependencies, and if the software didn't compile correctly, debug it and figure out what the issue was, and either potentially fix it or maybe even write some code to sort of deal with that. Doing things like scripting with automation. These are still skills that a lot of people don't have, but at that time in the late '90s, they were pretty unique skills. They were not very common that people had, and especially if you go further back to that for the generations before me, if you were a computer scientist in the '80s, you were probably only working for a few different companies. There's not a ton of places for you to go ahead and work, but if you were working, you were doing all right, right? You were not having problems paying the mortgage, and that's because of scarcity. So by focusing on a niche, you are going to be a more rarefied commodity. You're going to be a more rarefied skill set, and that's going to lead you to some potential benefits that you can take advantage of, namely more money. Now, the risk is that the technology world changes, and it changes quickly, and it changes dramatically. So if you specialize in something, there is a risk that you are going to be, um, swept away with a rising tide. You're going to be somebody who's been, doing a particular thing for a long time, and then you look up, and all of a sudden, that is no longer a skill set that's very needed, and that happens quite a bit. So what I'm going to talk about is trying to find a specialty and uh, going down that path. And I think it's a good path to go down, uh, but just doing it in an informed way where you know what the risks are. And you also are cognizant that you need to go do some things in order to make sure that you stay current. So, have projects outside of work, for example, be playing around in your home lab, things that we've talked about already for the beginning of your career. If you're specializing in Hadoop, let's say, um, that's awesome. I have no expectation of Hadoop going away, but I don't know. No one does. That's the thing about tech, is that 5 years from now, somebody may come up with a completely different model to handle massive data sets, and all of a sudden your Hadoop admin kind of gigs are out the window. Or you'll see things like Amazon and Google having basic hosted Hadoop options where you can just turn them on with a button. So all of a sudden, Hadoop administrators are less valuable, still probably be valuable, but less valuable potentially. And Hadoop developers maybe have more innate value. So those are some things to think about a little bit, and at least sort of consider when you're looking at what you want to go do. So I'm going to take a look at a couple different sort of certifications that you might, or kind of routes that you might want to go look at. Not the specific certification, but the potential availability kind of jobs that you might want to go look at. So I'm going to jump over here. So let me go over to my diagramming application. So these are going to be some unique or specialty certifications. So there's a number of these that come to mind. I think probably the ones that we'll start off with are going to be things that you already are aware of, right? But they're a form of specialization. So network admin, right? So if you're managing your Cisco devices, if you're managing your network infrastructure, that's a skill set, right? It's still computing, but you're focused on the network portion of it, which is a valuable thing. Security, right? So security is definitely going to be a skill set that people are looking for. I think those are probably some of the most common ones. But even things like Windows and Linux are also skill sets that people are going to be looking at. So those are places that I think most people are familiar with. They're going to be things that you're going to want to pay attention to. And that's, kind of even things I sort of almost think of as sort of your base level certifications, especially the Windows and Linux ones. It's very handy to have a network certification, especially if you're new to the industry, to just show that you understand how things like IP work, right? But IP is not the only kind of network, right? So for example, one of the other kind of things you might look at is SAN. So SAN is storage area networks. And you can do that over IP, but you can also go ahead and use fiber channel over IP. Or fiber channel, I should just say it. You can do fiber channel over IP, but most people don't. You can do fiber channel, right? You can go ahead and do fiber channel over Ethernet, right? So that's a specialization. So somebody who is mainly spending their time managing brocade switches has historically been a very, very valuable commodity. It's worth noting, though, that with the advent of iSCSI, for example, not quite as valuable as they used to be. So that's something to consider, right? But SAN is potentially a place that you can go ahead and look at, getting into. Likewise, there's NAS, right? And to an extent, a lot of times people don't even think of this as a specialization, right? You think, well, if I'm doing Windows stuff, I've got Windows file sharing. If I'm doing Linux stuff, I've got NFS, right? Those are NAS protocols. That's just part of the operating system. Yeah, but if you specialize in it, then you can do it at much larger scale. And that's kind of where these kind of go in. And if you go combine these together, right, that is a storage admin / engineer. And that's a route that you can go down and take a look at, right? So that's one place to kind of start. Another area that you might want to go ahead and look at is backups. And I think for folks who are new to the industry, that's actually an area that's potentially worth looking into. Being a backup admin is not going to be an exciting job. It's also an area where a lot of times people who are at the end of their career go into because it's kind of an easy gig. But to an extent, right? I'm generalizing. There's a lot of stuff that you get in backup that can get very complicated and it can be interesting. But just doing your restores, your tape rotations, if you're still using retape, validating your media, things like that. That's not usually where kind of people that are in the sort of the prime of their career are, unless they're doing consulting, unless they're doing the implementation of it. So you're going in and you're setting up the tape libraries, you're setting up your VTLs, you're setting up, all that kind of stuff. If you're just doing day-to-day management of it, that's something that oftentimes is sort of a very straightforward kind of role. But if you were a junior admin and you already had some Windows and Linux experience, and you could go add to that something like a net backup certification. Net backup being, I think probably the most popular backup product in the enterprise out there. That might be a very useful thing to have on your resume, and that might be able to get you a job that's not help desk, that's sort of adjacent to that, but still a junior admin kind of position. So that could be something worth looking at. Likewise, if you go ahead and take security, right, there's a bunch of specializations off of security. So penetration testing, right? There's combination of network and security with firewall, right? So there's a number of these certifications that are out there that you might want to go ahead and take a look at. I'm not going to go through a list because there's not a complete list out there, but there's a lot of these specializations that you can potentially try to figure out. And I think this is another area where trying to network with your peers can be useful, or actually not network with your peers, network with people that are coming from like a generation before you, right? So who are the people that that are already working in the field? Ask them what they think might be certifications that or specializations that could be useful. Another way to go do it is just to go look at job boards. So I pulled up Dice, and I just did a search for SAN. There's a whole bunch of different storage admin jobs, right? So things like that. So you can go look at those. And you can see that there's a number of jobs where, this is senior Linux architect role. I haven't looked at this before, so I'm just jumping on this kind of green. But, if we go look down the kind of things, they're saying, well, you need to have network administration stuff, you need to have DevOps, Python scripting, things like that. But they're also probably going to be looking for, SAN and NAS, right? So experience supporting VMware. Well, there's another kind of route for certification. I think most of you guys are familiar with that already. But what I'm getting to is that you can kind of zoom in to, what are some potential areas that you might want to work in that would set you apart from other potential candidates, right? So, backup jobs, right? So I did a backup as a search. There's a bunch of backup jobs, or a bunch of jobs that have backup as a requirement on them. I'm just looking at in my general area. I'm out in Los Angeles, so I'm just doing a search there. So, likewise, I skipped that one, I guess, but security admin, let's say. Right. But I think it could potentially behoove you to try to go ahead and search for jobs that are not the thing that you would necessarily think of. So what you might want to go do is you might want to go to, your favorite job website, and instead of doing searches, look for, or I should say, instead of doing for searches for things that you are qualified for, search for things that you have some experience on the list of things that they need and that you are specifically not certified for. And then that could be an area where you say, all right, well, I mean, I think this is, this is not exactly one that's the people are not thinking about, but cloud itself is sort of a specialization. So here there's a cloud and security engineer, right? Well, here they're looking at, just some requirements here, just a list of kind of bullet point requirements. So CCNA, configuration management, Hadoop, Java, all this kind of stuff. What you might do is you might go look at that and be like, all right, well, this seems like a cool kind of job. I might want to go do this. Well, there's a SQL thing on there. I don't have any SQL. So maybe I can go look for taking a Postgres class, right? Or a SQL Server class, depending on what kind of ecosystem you work in. Maybe you go look at, hopefully already having some kind of Linux certification, stuff on your resume. But maybe you say, all right, configuration management. Are there any configuration management certifications that I might be able to go ahead and get? Because that could differentiate me in a way that, is very different than other folks. So if I just do a search for configuration management, certification. We're probably going to get some like ITIL stuff. But, you know, you can go ahead and see that in this case, we get, well, um, I'll let you guys kind of dig into the various different kind of things. But we say uh, Software Configuration Management Professional, SCMP, right? I have no idea what this certification is. I've never heard of it before. But apparently this is a certification. And I'll tell you, you talk to anybody who works in an enterprise environment, certification, or not certification, but change management is a massively important thing. And, you know, it's one of those things that generally just going to be assumed that if you're early on in your career that you may not have any experience with. So something like this could potentially be a very interesting certification. So looking at this one right here, I have no idea if this is a good certification. Do your own research, stuff like that. But I'm looking at this. It's 9 hours, it looks like, right? So very, very straightforward. There's a little exam. So you'd probably want to go figure out like what you need to go study before this. But the fee to go ahead and take the thing is $100, and if you take both, it's $170. That's not a huge investment, right? That's $17 that you're setting aside for 10 weeks. Right? You can afford that certification if you wanted to, because that comes with the class too. So again, I'm not recommending you go take this class. I have no idea if this is decent or not, but I will say that you could then put configuration management on your resume, and then that might differentiate you, right? Again, you saw like Python as a requirement. You could go take a Python certification, right? Um, is there actually going to be a value in getting a Python certification? I don't know, man. I mean, like in reality, I wouldn't assume that just because somebody had a Python certification that they were competent in writing code. I'd want to go look at their GitHub and look at their code portfolio and talk to them about, you know, what they thought were problems and stuff like that, and projects they worked on before. But, you know, if you had a certification in Python, then that would be something that you could go put on your resume. So I think one of the things that you want to go do when you're early on in your career is start broadly, right? You know, you need to know how a network works, right? You know that you need to know how a computer works. You know that you need to know how systems work, operating systems specifically, and all the kind of stuff that goes along with that. You know, so package management, managing you know, server instances, deploying things, all that kind of stuff, right? So that's your Linux, that's your Windows, right? Whichever kind of ecosystem you're in. Yeah, you're going to need to know that kind of baseline stuff. Are you going to need to have certifications for every single piece of that? Nah, I don't know. I think that early on in your career, certifications do have a pretty decent value to them. So, you know, it might be worth it to go get those certifications, but I wouldn't say that you definitely have to get them. You know, especially the really, really early ones. So like an A plus certification, you know, that's cool. But if you have a Linux certification, everyone's going to kind of assume that you already know how a computer works and the basic kind of stuff that's covered in an A plus kind of certification. Um, you know, very basic networking certification. I think there's some value in that. If you have a specific certification for a vendor like CCNA, something like that, that might be more valuable than sort of just a generic Network Plus kind of thing. So once you have those kind of baseline certification kind of stuff done, and you have some projects that you've done on your own to kind of show that you have a you know, understanding, and you play with this stuff and you enjoy it, then I think the next step is to sort of look for a specialization that makes sense for you, right? So if you play around with projects and they had a database and you liked, you know, the database stuff, well, you know, DBAs historically have made a pretty good living, right? Um, so you know, that's not necessarily a bad specialization to get into. You just do want to be aware that the industry is constantly in flux. So nowadays, I can go, you know, jump on Amazon. I can go ahead and jump on Google or Azure, and I can go spin up a database instance that's entirely hosted and managed by that cloud provider. And you can just, you know, start dealing with the SQL stuff, right? So if you are a traditional DBA in the sense that you are somebody who just manages that that database continuing to run, as opposed to writing, stored procedures and complex SQL queries and basically being more or less sort of like a SQL programmer almost. Um, those kind of low level jobs on the database side might not be there in a few years. So what you want to do is you always want to be continuously improving your skills, continuously having a direction that you can move into. So, maybe you start off with looking at, you know, uh, um, database certification, whether that's Oracle or Postgres or SQL, whatever it is. You start off with that. And then once you get your job, you go and take a class once a year so that you are, familiar with, um, you know, Google Cloud Platform, or you're familiar with, um, whatever, right? You just kind of, you pick a thing that, if this one goes away, this one's available over here. And you can do a substitution. So, anyway, I hope that was useful. I think that at least something to kind of be thinking about for those of you folks who are kind of getting into the IT space and the IT career. And I think that right now especially, it's good to be sort of working on these things, looking at your certification, looking at your resume. For those of you guys who are not actively brand new in the industry, and are sort of mid-level things like that. And this is not me trying to sell you courseware, things like that. But I think it's pretty clear that we're headed into a recession. It's just a question of when exactly is that recession going to hit, right? So I made a video about 6 months ago saying that I thought the recession was probably going to come in about 6 months. It looks like I was a little bit early on that, but I do think the recession is coming. So one of the things that I always recommend that people do is, if you have an inkling that these kind of things are maybe happening, um, check to see if your current employer has resources that can help you with paying for training. A lot of companies will pay for certifications as long as you pass. So maybe now is a good time to start looking at doing an AWS certification in your spare time, doing a Azure certification, doing GCP, getting a certification in Kubernetes, whatever it is that you're interested in. Maybe start getting the sort of wheels turning on that kind of stuff. That way, if 6 months or a year from now, the economy gets rocked again a little bit, you've got some potential options, and you've already sort of started working on the resume and your skills, and things like that. Additionally, and I've talked about this in the past, and I hopefully it's not not me sort of coming off as depressing and being like, oh, it's all doom and gloom in the future with the recession, because hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong, and we won't have another recession for another few years, right? It's going to happen at some point, but um, you know hopefully I'm wrong and it's not right around the corner. But another thing that you definitely want to look at doing is have a safety net, right? So if you've been living a little bit high on the hog, maybe dial things back a little bit for the next few months, and start putting a little bit more into savings, a little bit more into savings, and kind of keep that trend going until you get to a place where you're like, okay, I can have 6 months to a year worth of reserve funds, where if I lose my job tomorrow, I can just live on that. That's a really, really important thing to have. I usually call it a fuck you fund, because the other side benefit is if you have a if you have a boss or an employee that starts making unreasonable asks of you, you can turn around and safely say fuck you, if it comes down to it, and then walk. Hopefully you never are in that position, but and if you're in that position, you try your best to not do that. Look for look for another gig, find the other gig first, and then once you have the gig, you leave your current one. But I think just from a mental health perspective, it's important to have the option to tell someone to take a jump in the river, if if you feel that you have to. So anyway, I'm getting off topic a little bit, but thank you guys for watching. I hope this video was useful. Also, Just as sort of a kind of little side note, I have a friend of mine that I've worked with for a number of years. He owns the company that does a lot of my bookings, and one of the things that we've been talking about recently, and I think I'm probably going to go ahead and do this, is give him a really cheap license for the LPI class that I developed, that I was going to do for that friends and family giveaway. And he's doing a really cool thing. He's working on starting a project to help retrain veterans who are getting out of their service and going to be transitioning to the private sector. So he's going to be doing a project. I think going to be starting a GoFundMe to kind of put this thing together where they're going to be doing these large kind of retraining things. It's going to be sort of a pilot. So, um, you know, I don't know. Like I'm just gonna giving you a heads up that that's something that they're doing. I don't think I'm probably gonna be teaching for them just because the rate would be so much lower. But I might do one or two classes just to you know um, kind of do that because that's sort of a nice thing. And I have a lot of customers that have been either military or military adjacent, and they're always good folks. So so yeah, I might do one of those classes, and if I do, I think what I'll do is for folks who missed out on the friends and family one, especially for the couple of you guys that had signed up, what I'll do is we'll sneak you into those classes and maybe see if they can see if I can go add a student on my own. So you probably have the you know I'd still honor that friends and family rate for the couple of you folks who did that, but otherwise I'd have some kind of option of where we could maybe sneak in one or two people per class. So that's just a heads up. Probably going to come down the pipeline. Also, there's I think they're going to be doing it with a GoFundMe, which is neat. So so yeah, if you, if that is something that you want to go support at some point down the road, I'll probably make a video just talking about that and give you guys a link to the GoFundMe if you think that's something that you would uh, feel like supporting. No pressure, just sort of a nice thing. He's doing a cool thing. He's giving back, and I thought I would try to help him out with that as much as I could because it's for a good cause. So anyway, I'm gonna shut up. I'll see you guys next week and have a great rest of your day.